56 days away from the draft. It's in Kansas City this year. What's the most likely scenario of the draft was right now? We know the Texans have the second pick. They got the 12th pick. Combine is underway. The draft was right now. What's Nick Casario doing?
You guys ready for this?
I'm ready for this.
I believe today, as we sit 8 weeks out from the 2023 NFL Draft, the most likely scenario for the Houston Texans is sticking it picking at number 2, and it's drafting Kentucky quarterback Will Levis.
No way.
I believe that is the most likely scenario as we sit, as we talk today. I believe that is what would occur if the draft was literally tonight.
Are you okay?
I'm not okay. I would be upset with that.
Why do you feel this way?
I feel like the absolute, no doubt, clean, off the field conversation around Will Levis where nobody anywhere is going to say a bad thing about him.
Well, he does put mayo in his coffee.
Is going to be a big positive for him. And when you look at the type of quarterback that Nick Casario worked with in New England for all those years, you looked at all the types of quarterbacks they drafted when they had Tom Brady. All those guys were 6 feet 2 inches or taller, and most of them were 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". Mallett was a big guy. That was one of the highest investments they made. Now, yeah, Jimmy Garoppolo was the highest investment they made in Brady's time from the QB standpoint. He's 6'2", but they drafted big guys. Levis is a big guy, that prototype size. You hear that linebacker size at the quarterback spot. Unfortunately, sometimes it looks like a linebacker is playing quarterback when Will Levis is under center. But you factor that in with the mobility that he showcased at different times and some of the toughness. Toughness is a big thing that D'Amico Ryans has talked about a bunch. And I can be critical of Will Levis for being injured this season. He played through that injury. It was to his detriment at times, but there probably wasn't another option at Kentucky. That's going to be something that maybe is made an excuse for some of the poor play. And when you look at the toolsiness, the projection, the size, what he is now, and how much closer he is to playing right away than Anthony Richardson is, I believe right now, Nick Casario and D'Amico Ryans, if they were drafting at number 2 and Bryce Young goes number 1, which I believe is going to be the case, they're drafting Will Levis.
Wow.
I don't like it. That's not what I think they should do. Like I want everybody to be clear about what I'm saying. I'm not going back on what I've been saying. I believe if they drafted tonight, they draft Will Levis.
Would you cry if that happens?
Well, if Bryce Young went 1 and Will Levis went 2 and he went 1 to the Indianapolis Colts, you guys know what the scenario is. Puke blood.
Yeah.
Okay? And if they didn't draft Bryce Young when Will Levis was there, or he was there, and they drafted Will Levis, that's a cry scenario.
Is that even worse?
If it's way worse to me. It's way worse because you can have a solid argument to not move up to 1.
See, I disagree because they could have had the number 1 pick because they blew it.
I understand, and again, that's a big negative on Nick Casario in the long term. If that guy that goes 1 is better than the guy he picks at 2, that's something we'll assess. But I can understand to an extent. Hey, we just didn't want to spend the capital to go up there. Like it's bad, and then Young's off the board. You can't draft him. You draft Levis because you like him more than Stroud. But it's way worse if Stroud goes 1, and then you pick Levis over Young, because then it's a straight bet. It's a straight bet against the durability of Bryce Young, and a straight bet on Will Levis turning into what he's supposed to.
That's a cry scenario.
That's the cry scenario,
which is worse than puking blood.
Yes.
Is it though?
Learn something new every day.
You can just wipe the tears off. Blood, I mean, it makes a mess.
I think I'd rather cry than puke blood, but both of those would be very unfortunate.
Yes.
I'm surprised you're saying this, Cody.
This, to me, is the most likely scenario for the Texans right now, 8 weeks from the draft.
The guy who coined the phrase, the era of good vibes, is saying that the good vibes are coming to an end.
He's saying hell is apparently upon the Texans.
I'm a believer in President James Monroe Caserio. The era of good vibes will continue. The Texans will trade up to number 1 and select Bryce Young.
That's the likely one.
They're not messing around anymore down there.
I like that.
And ownership cares about its image for the first time in a while, and they care about getting this right, and they care about getting the fans bought back in. I think this coaching staff search showed us that completely. I don't think they're done. I don't think they plan on stopping. I don't think it's, we got D'Amico Ryan, so it's good. The fans are back. We're back in their good graces. Everyone's going to love us, and we're going to sell out all of these games like we used to. Now, there's more work that needs to be done. They know most of the fans want Bryce Young. Not everybody. Of course, there are guys who like Stroud more. There are guys who like Levis more. A couple of guys who like Anthony Richardson more. But the majority of Texans fans, the majority of football people around the league think that Bryce Young is the best quarterback in this draft. I don't think the Texans are messing around anymore. I don't think they care about how bad it's going to look that they have to trade to move up to number one when, Jake, like you said, they could have had the number one pick if they didn't screw things up in Indy in that last week of the season. But I really believe at this moment that they are going to do whatever they possibly can to get the quarterback that they want. Hell, I think it's more likely they trade up to number one and end up with Will Levis than stick and pick at two. I think they're trading up to number one. I really do. And because it's the era of good vibes, because that's the guy that would make the fans the happiest, and also the guy who I think is the best football player, that's more important to me, I think they're going to do just that. I think they're going to end up with Bryce Young at number one on draft night.
Man, right now, if the draft were to be today, I don't think they trade up one spot. I think they stick and pick the quarterback at 2. And maybe that quarterback's Will Levis. Maybe that quarterback's Anthony Richardson. Maybe that quarterback's C.J. Stroud. But I think that's the most likely scenario right now.
You got to pick which player.
I'll go out on a limb and I'll say it's Stroud. But I don't really think I'm going that much out on a limb. He seems to be the consensus number 2 by most people. That could obviously change pending the combine results, visits, workouts, all that. I'm going to say Stroud. I think they stick and pick at 2, and they select C.J. Stroud. And the reason for that is simply the optics. I think the optics look terrible to trade up one spot, take an undersized quarterback who's not Trevor Lawrence or Joe Burrow. He might be great, but I think there's a huge risk in that, and I don't think Casario is about taking risks. I don't think he is. I don't think he's going to trade up one spot. I don't think he'll do it. He values his draft picks, which is why they should have the first pick right now, but he doesn't strike me as a guy that's going to give up a bunch of picks for one spot. Not when you look at, as Cody outlined, his history of the quarterbacks he's been associated with, the body types. I don't think he's doing it for Bryce Young. If Bryce Young was 6'3", maybe he would. I don't think he's doing it for a 5'10" and a half QB.
I do want to push back on Casario not being risky, but I think my pushback actually helps your argument.
I'll take it then.
Casario was very risky in taking Derek Stingley over Sauce Gardner last year.
Was he, though? Because you could fall back on, he plays in the SEC, and we know what he did as a true freshman.
Yeah, but we've talked about how we believe upwards of 28 of the 32 teams would have made the selection would not have made the selection that Nick Casario did. Like, he took an injury risk guy, and the guy got hurt. And that was a risk to take Derek Stingley. And you know what? The guy behind him was an all-pro. It didn't turn out well. I wonder if taking that big risk last year makes Casario slightly risk-averse at the top of the draft this year, which would be stick and pick. Take a guy with a bit more traditional size than Bryce Young, like a Will Levis, like a C.J. Stroud. And that's one of those things that I wonder if he felt like last year was a risk that he was taking that didn't pay off. Does he want to take another risk in the trade-up for the undersized quarterback? Now, I'd be happy to take that risk, and I would say don't change who you are based off the result of one draft, and certainly one season of play for all those players. But we've talked about it. This is a guy that believes, based on the way he talked and his body language, that his job's in jeopardy. And BKU laid out very succinctly and very well earlier this week. This could be 2 years, and then there's a new general manager in the building. And Nick Casario will be on his way out, and D'Amico Ryans would have a new running buddy at the top of the organization. And so does that make him risk-averse and make him want to do something a bit safer, which is stay at 2, take whatever's there, and hope that guy is the guy?
You know, it's funny. I don't know which plan would be more risk-averse. Is it sticking and picking at 2, or is it trading up to number 1 to guarantee that you get your guy? Like, obviously, if you trade up, there's a little bit of a risk because you better be right and you're giving up draft picks to get your guy. But if you're at 2, you're kind of hoping somebody falls to you. I know Casario earlier this week is like, you've got groups of players and we sort of tier them off. And look, if they stick and pick it too, they're going to tell you that the guy they drafted was the guy they wanted all along.
This was our guy.
How do we get so lucky? Oh, my God. We were worried after week 18 that we weren't going to get our dude, and sure enough, everything broke perfectly for us because everything always breaks perfectly for the Texans. Can't even say that with a straight face. I don't know which one's more risk-averse. You got to get this pick right. Casario knows that. So is it riskier to stay at 2 and hope, or is it riskier to give up future draft picks to go get your guy? But obviously there's risk in being wrong there too.
Okay, I have a question that I want to ask you, and then we can debate Nick Casario's resume to this point and how much we want to carry it into 2023 and the effect on what we expect Casario to do. We're talking about which is riskier, sticking and picking, or which is or trading up to the number 1 spot and maybe drafting Bryce Young, getting your guy, and which one was riskier. And to me, staying put is riskier because you're going to inherently have your guy compared to Bryce Young if he goes number 1, or whoever goes number 1. Your guy's going to get compared to him. And then also at 2, you'd likely have another quarterback compared to your guy as well, probably whoever the 3rd quarterback drafted is. And so, again, we've talked about this. This draft pick is either going to get Nick Casario fired or get him an extension. Mm-hmm. If it works, he'll get an extension. If it doesn't work, it'll be one of the main reasons he's getting fired. He's getting canned. I want to add Nick Casario from just a year ago to the equation. What's the I'm smarter than you move at 2 from Nick Casario?
You talked about it.
It's Will Levis.
Yep.
It's Will Levis with C.J. Stroud on the board, or it's Will Levis with Bryce Young on the board, or it's I don't need to trade up because the team that's trading up to 1 is not taking Will Levis, and I'm taking Will Levis at number 2. That's another reason I believe Will Levis is in the conversation, because he's squarely in the I'm smarter than you category and the style of pick that Derek Stingley was a year ago when Sauce Gardner was on the board. And so that's one of the big things about why 8 weeks out, I believe Levis is the guy for them, is because if we're factoring in Casario from a year ago, I'm smarter than you was Derek Stingley. The I'm smarter than you is Will Levis.